Sup, hardcore kids. Today we're going to be reviewing the new Final Resting Place. And if you are into hardcore, brutal death metal, slam, or just anything underground, extreme metal, um, chances are you either just finding out about Final Resting Place or you've known about them through their EP. For those who don't know, it is a hardcore slash brutal death metal band. Started, I think, like the last 2 years. I think it's been talked about before that, but officially became a band the last year, 2 years. Very New York death metal influenced in their imagery. Their first demo or EP, their logo came from Entorturement. The artwork was like a tribute to Scatter Remnant's album Destined to Fail. The posters look like Traumacide. Shirts kind of look like Pyrexia. But worshipping older bands is nothing new. I mean, you have bands in brutal death metal like Human Artifacts, which is Matt from Lividity. The name comes from Mortal Decay compilation called Gathering of Human Artifacts. You had a band called Dead for Days, which again came from lyrics from Forensic era Mortal Decay. Sermon of Mockery is a band came from Pyrexia's debut album. Even the drummer from Final Resting Place's previous band, Vomit Forth, comes from an Internal Bleeding lyric in Anointed in Servitude. My own band, Impure Conception, comes from an Afterbirth song on their demo. And then I just reviewed another band called Voracious Content from Texas, which is like devourment type stuff. Obviously the name comes from Internal Bleeding. So, I mean, like I mentioned, it's nothing new, but I don't think the band was trying to make it seem like they were, like, one of the first ones to do this type of stuff. It's been done before. But with this, so their first demo was more hardcore sounding and hardcore influence, kind of just was, like, hardcore with some New York death metal, stuff. Drumming remind me something like more like beatdown bands like Denied, but it was more hardcore focused. I feel like this new Final Resting Place definitely is a lot more brutal death metal sounding, but it's definitely more attuned to hardcore, the way it was produced and the way it was recorded in sounds. It sort of seems like on this one, Final Resting Place put riffs over slams, while all the other bands like Internal Bleeding and Dehumanized, they put slams over riffs. So it seems like stylistically, there is a difference. I know a lot of people like to say this is like Scatter Remnants is like Child. There's really not much Scattered Remnants in the actual music. This one kind of has like the vocals on the new Final Resting Place are kind of like a little bit more echoey, reverby, muddy. So it's kind of similar to Scatter Remnants. I mean, a little bit if you want to say, but the Scatter Remnants I don't hear. It's more akin to, I would say, Dehumanized, Denied in the drumming especially. There is a little bit of repudiation drumming here and there. But the main focus is definitely the bass production. I mean, it's a very muddy. So if you want polished brutal death metal or polished slam, this is definitely not for you. It's very muddy on purpose. It's very echoey on purpose. It definitely sounds like you're there seeing them live when you listen to it. So the production, I dig the production. I mean, it does sound nice. It reminds you of like a '90s demo. Like if you were to pop in, um, a Dehumanized or Afterbirth or an early, I don't know, Internal Bleeding, Malamore. Um, so it seems to be that the hardcore kids are eating this up right now. Days Records has kind of exploded and crossed paths over to death metal, especially with Torture on their label. Um, Another cool band I liked was Fatal Realm. I thought they were pretty cool. But Final Resting Place is definitely one of the bands in brutal death metal that has done something over the past year that not others can say that they have done. Um, I feel like a lot of brutal death metal that has come up recently, you just kind of listen to it and then it's off to the next thing that has artwork, and the artwork looks cool. It looks '90s. Um, I feel like this is something that their drummers always wanted to do. I've been following Vomit 4 for a while. I remember like they were playing house shows. They were playing in front of like 50 people at dive bars in Philly. Um, so I've been around since the beginning of Vomit 4. If I remember when they first started, and I feel like this is something that um, he's tried to accomplish in Vomit 4, but it just wasn't right. But I feel like he's finally accomplished what he was set out to do. I mean, he's always loved New York death metal and old school brutal death metal. So I see the aesthetic, I see the goal, and I feel like the goal has definitely been reached thus far. Obviously, I think there's more from the band, but musically, I think that there's just that one little thing, like that, just one little thing that is missing. I don't really know what it is. Just maybe more like a little bit more riffage. It seems like stylistically there's like an opening riff, and then it's New York death metal and hardcore, and then there's like a little tiny tempo change in the middle, and then at the end it's another riff. I feel like it just needs that one little bit section of riffage. But other than that, if you are into hardcore, if you're into death metal, old school brutal death metal, of course bands like Internal Bleeding, Dehumanize, stuff like that. This is definitely going to be something that's going to be right up your alley. I know a lot of people are going to be like, this is just dehumanized riffs that I've heard 30 years ago. And I mean, you'd be correct, but there is a little bit something new and something executed done here that has really exploded, and for good reason. There's something that has been created from doing this style from the band, and obviously they've got the recognition for a reason. I don't think it's because the way they look. Yes, I think that the imagery and the tributes to old school, well-established bands have definitely helped, but that's not the main bread and butter, I would say. With saying that, this band is definitely, I feel, if you're into like Japanese slam and like Ipsy slam and like blasturbation bands, more akin to mid 2000, like early to mid 2000s brutal death metal, you're probably not gonna like this. So I mean, I'm talking about the cephalotripsies, the digested flesh of Condemned, Brodekin. This is probably not for you, only because it's so much hardcore influenced. But I would give it a try. Overall, I'd rate the new Final Resting Place like a good like 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, but like I said, I think that there's just that the little tiny thing missing in the songs. I just think it needs like another riff or two, but that's just me. That's just my opinion. I'm just a music critic. Um, but listening, that was pretty much my only concern. I mean, the musicianship is not bad at all. It's really good. Obviously, these guys have done their homework, and I know a lot of people are quick to just be like, these are just hardcore kids playing brutal death metal, and you wouldn't be wrong. One would say these are just hardcore kids that they discovered, New York death metal like 2 years ago, and you probably wouldn't be wrong. But these guys execute it well, so I mean, I respect it. I don't care personally that these are just kids that found, I guess you could say, like a trend of like old school brutal death metal, like New York death metal, like 90s death metal. I don't care if hardcore kids are finding 90s death metal and making good music. Like what would be wrong? Like what's wrong with that? If it's kids discovering these type of bands and making really bad music, then it's like then you can get the fuck out of the scene. But I mean, obviously these kids have done their homework. Someone told me that they covered Immortal Suffering. I don't know if that's true, but if they did, I mean, that's more respect. Immortal Suffering's been around for quite some time, and obviously they're a classic. I think it's one of the best sounding New York death metal bands out there, for Immortal Suffering. But overall, but I mean, when this comes out, I would snag a copy. Other than that, there's not much to say. I mean, the music's just going to speak for itself. If you're into, hardcore or old school brutal death metal that sounds more towards the hardcore side, if like Irate, End of Days, Denied, if like Beat Down, if you like more of that as opposed to modern brutal death metal, or like mid to like early to mid late 2000s brutal death metal, like I mentioned, you probably are not going to dig this. But if you obsess over Internal Bleeding and Dehumanized, then I feel like this is something that you could add to your collection, that at least be something similar. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Is this just a hardcore album pretending to be brutal death metal for fucking trendy kids? Maybe. I'm not here to give that opinion. But if you have a problem with the band, write it in the comments. I'd love to give feedback. If you think these guys are fucking posers, I'd love to hear feedback. I'm all ears. Until next time.